Coming to you live from WRUN Tennessee. It's the Scribbling Woman.
Hi, I'm Nancy Rue. I am a scribbling woman, and so are you, and that's why we're having this conversation. Here, we talk about the writerly life that is unique to you, no matter your age, your season, or where you are in your creative journey. You are an official scribbly, so let's talk. An important part of respecting our writerly lives and ourselves as writers, which is what we're talking about in this season of the Scribbling Woman podcast. It's, I think, important to feel like we know what the Sam Hill we're doing. I mean, it's hard enough to create without wondering, am I completely stupid? You open that door just a crack, and all manner of bohos are going to elbow their way in. We need to feel confident. We need to write with a voice of authority. We need to feel like we can put our work out there where it deserves a place to be, because it does. Otherwise, we come across like, okay, I wrote this thing and I kind of know what I'm talking about, so here it is, but it's probably lame. Actually, it is lame, so never mind, don't read it. Or worse than that, we just become completely paralyzed and we can't write at all. Well, I think I can help us with that. Just a disclaimer, I'm going to be talking more about myself in this episode than I usually do. And that is not in aid of, pay attention to me, I'm wonderful. It's really more about offering you examples that I really do know something about. So let's start with an adage that we're all told when we first start writing. Write what you know. And it's great wisdom at its roots. Let's take Louisa May Alcott, for example. Louisa May, as a young writer, had grand ideas, and she was writing these massive Gothic novels and stories that involved ladies with petticoats and tea, and none of which was part of her own personal experience. It's the life that she wished for. So she took one of her stories to an editor of a magazine. He read it, he looked straight at her, and he said, "Stick to your teaching, Miss Alcott. You can't write." Well, of course, she was devastated. Who wouldn't be? But fortunately, someone else came along and said, "Why don't you write what you know?" And so she wrote a story based on her own background as a child and a young woman in a family of 4 sisters. And that became Little Women. And what would we do without that? She even used that concept in the story of Little Women when Jo is talking to an editor who says, "Stick to your teaching, Miss March. You can't write." My first published stories were for a teen audience, which only made sense because I was teaching high school students at the time. Later, I started hanging out more with tween girls and realized they were now my favorite brand of kid. And that became my sweet spot for most of the work that I've done. Then as I got older and I felt wiser, a little more knowledgeable about the world, that's when I felt qualified to write for women. And most of what I write now is contemporary women's fiction. So I think that as we get more life on us, we can consider this, and this is what I want you to consider. What is in your immediate past? What do you feel pretty confident about saying, yeah, I've experienced this and I know it? What are you sure of in this season? What do you know about right now? Now, you can also use anything in your experience to lend that voice of authority to your work. It's all fuel, or as author Joyce Magnan calls it, fodder. Don't you love that? So, for example, I went through a series of 4 jaw surgeries, each one requiring that my jaw was wired shut. Can you even imagine what that was like for a person like me? So one of my characters in the Nama Beach High series had her jaw broken. She had to have her jaw wired shut. I was definitely writing about what I knew. In my life, I've experienced episodes of clinical depression. It was the Great Depression of 1983, of 1995, of 2006. And now that I feel that I am recovering and I'm living my life differently, then my main character in Healing Stones experienced an episode of depression. In the work that I just published, More Than a Footnote, protagonist Mary is just coming out of that black cave. I know up close and personal about abuse in the extended family, dealing with an eating disorder. I know about loss and grief, and all of these things have informed my stories. Now, at the time, I didn't think, oh, I'm definitely going to use this. I'm going to write about this. It takes some distance to realize, yeah, this could be shaped into a story. So, how about you? What are your life experiences that can not only enrich a story, but encourage and inspire and even educate your readers? Think of it not as using these things that you've been through, but imparting the knowledge that you gained from it. So there's not just that. Think about incorporating the little bits and pieces that give your work text and color. I have a whole file of things to use later to be pulled out when the time is right. I have been waiting literally years to use this sentence in a story, and I am about to. Don't you love this? Nylon strap? You can't pull an old cop out of a donut store with a nylon strap. Get you a chain, boy. I cannot wait for that to come out of the mouth of one of the characters in my current story. So, what about, these kinds of things? Because these are things that I have also used as color and texture. Running, lattes, labyrinths, Labrador retrievers, cranky cats, Volkswagens. Everything gets to come out and play. So look at the snippets that make you and your life unique. Is it your bread making? Is it the various ways that you color your hair? Is it your passion for shoes or gadgets or prayer beads? Let them come in and color your story. Now, we don't have to stop there, or we would be very limited in what we could write in a lifetime. If we're continuing to respect our writerly lives and the possibilities, I think we can stretch to writing what we want to know. If authors didn't do that, there would be no historical fiction. There'd be no speculative fiction like sci-fi. There'd be no fantasy in which the writer explores the world of magic. Think about it. If we only wrote about what we had actually experienced, then no one would write about the mind of a serial killer. Only an astronaut could write about being one, and the same goes for a constant pianist or a prima ballerina, a Supreme Court justice or a brain surgeon. Now, I personally have never operated a motorcycle for more than 3 feet, but being a female biker was at the core of the Reluctant Prophet series. I've never been a psychologist, but Sullivan Crisp's work in the Healing trilogy is essential to those books. I've never self-harmed, but my protagonist in The Merciful Scar certainly did. The key to being able to do this is getting some of it on you, experiencing what you want to know safely, realistically, and of course, legally. So, for instance, when I was writing Healing Stones, my protagonist, Demetria, was caught in a burning building. I'm trying to write that, and I thought, I haven't got a clue what this is like. So I went down to the local fire station here in Lebanon, and I'm talking to the guys, and they're trying to explain it to me. And one of them said, we just need to take her into the training tower. So a couple of days later, they suited me up, complete with that personal breathing apparatus, the full suit. I could hardly walk. And they took me into this room, and they closed it off. There was someone with me, of course. And they set this pile of stuff on fire. I think there was a mattress in there and a bunch of rags and some metal. Within seconds, I didn't know which way was up. Smoke is so disoriented. And I said to the firefighter next to me through my little microphone, if I didn't have this on, how long would it be before I would be dead? And he said, you'd be dead already. It's 9,000 degrees in here. We already would have burned your lungs from the inside out. I went home. I wrote that scene, and it may have been one of the most vivid things that I've ever done. When I was writing one of the real life series, my character had to learn to surf. So I took a lesson. I was terrible at it. It was great fun. The guy that taught me was absolutely adorable, but I did get a sense of what it's like to learn to surf. When I was researching some of the books for the Chicago years, which was part of the Christian Heritage series, Jim and I went to Chicago, and we took what was called the Untouchables tour. It was a bus tour led by these two guys who were acting like mobsters, and they took us to every place in Chicago where Al Capone and the like had done their dirty work. And everything was done like this, all right? And they would play a tape of a machine gun going off. And they said, when you hear this, you need to hit the deck. Well, I did. I think I was the only one on the bus that did, but I wanted to get some of it on me. And when we got off, one of those guys said to me, I like a doll like you. And that sentence came out of the mouth of little Al in one of my Chicago books. And then, of course, there was the infamous motorcycle lesson. Remember, I mentioned that I'd only driven about 3 feet. So I signed up for Harley's Rider's Edge, and I did great in the classroom. And within an hour of the actual practical training, I counseled myself out because I was a danger to myself and others. But that scene went right into The Reluctant Prophet. Of course, fortunately, Allison learned how to motorcycle. I limited myself to being on the back with my husband, but I had the full leathers. It can also mean immersing yourself in the setting. I personally choose settings for my stories, places that I want to go. From New Mexico for the Lucy Books and Healing Sands, all the way across the country to Concord, Massachusetts for my current Footnotes collection. From a week on a sheep ranch in Montana to a week in Savannah, Georgia. The first was for The Merciful Scar, and the second was for One Last Thing. We also get there by interviewing experts, okay? So therapist Dale McElhenney was instrumental in my writing of the Sullivan Crest series and also the Sophie books. I couldn't include anything medical without the help of my nurse practitioner / surrogate son, John Painter. The head of the burn unit at Vanderbilt University Medical Center took me on a personal tour of the burn unit when I was writing Healing Waters, because he said, I want you to get it right. This is not a torture chamber, and that's all we see on TV and in novels. I spent hours with attorney Michael Passano to get the courtroom scenes in more than a footnote right. I'm currently availing myself of the wisdom of non-binary friends so that the character Freddie can take shape. People love to talk about what they know so that you can know it too. So let's consider you. What do you want to know about? What excites your curiosity? What intrigues you? Where do you want to go? What places call to you? Who are the fascinating people whose knowledge you want to tap into? Once we've done our homework, then we are writing about what we know. It's just something that we've just learned. But I think most important of all, and this is where the real heart of our work comes in, we can and really must write about what we know about the human condition, the inner turmoil, the things that make people live and move and have their being, or prevent them from doing that fully. This is not just the context of our work. It's not where it happens and what happens, but it's what goes on inside. This is the real story. I do that by always starting with a word. Now, the word for all of my work is always authenticity. It's just that each time I write something, I add a brush stroke to that. And that is in the form, first of all, of a word. So such words have been surrender, sacrifice, self-worth. They've included forgiveness, freedom, wholeness, community. And then I ask a specific question about that word. So, for example, for healing stones, the word was forgiveness. Well, I couldn't cover everything there is to say about forgiveness in one book. I don't think anybody ever has in all literature that's ever been written. So the specific question was, what if you're fully repentant? You ask for forgiveness and no one will forgive you. For Antonia's choice, the word was surrender. What if I give up control, will I lose myself? And then finally, I dig deep and discover what is the answer to that question. And that's the knowing that informs the story. So forgiveness being the word and the question being, what if no one forgives me? The answer became, then you forgive the unforgiving and you live on because you know that God has already forgiven you. In terms of surrender and the question being, yeah, but what if I lose myself? The answer is surrendering control is the only way to find yourself. This is what my novels are about. Now, currently, I'm writing, as I said, about a non-binary character. And even though I'm learning all I can about what it's like to experience oneself in that way, Once Upon a Ransom isn't really about gender. My word here is freedom. And the question is, how can I be free with all of these forces still working against me, not just in the present, but in the past? And the answer I've discovered is that true freedom is in living not for what you're against and in terms of what's against you, but what are you for? Now, I can do this even though, unlike Freddie, I've never been non-binary. I've never been a single parent. I've never written and illustrated a children's book. I've never ridden a bicycle called Quidditch with my kid on the back. I didn't come out of a home with a domineering father or a background of really fundamentalist religion. Freddie and I basically have nothing in common in terms of our life circumstances, but we both know about false messages. We know the constant struggle to pull away from those messages, even though the resentment that they have formed is really what's keeping them clinging to us. I've learned, and Freddie will learn, that our only hope for freedom is in focusing on who we are meant to be. And that way, all of those voices from the past and the ignorance that surrounds us in the present simply withers up and dies. So let's consider you. What do you know about the human condition that you didn't fully understand 10 years ago, or maybe even 5? What has life taught you? We sometimes start a project and get stuck or abandon it because we don't know yet what the story is really about. And so we dig deep and we find out because we do know. So I think the conclusion we can draw is that we can only write about what we know. So we go into ourselves and we find it. So I'm thinking, here's what we do, Scribblies. We chronicle absolutely everything that we know, the bits and pieces, the experiences, the places, and the things that our soul tells us. And then we need to celebrate how freaking smart we are and how wise. And then, Scribblies, when we're ready, we need to write about it because we are the pros. As my daughter says, our job in life is to become experts on ourselves. And we need to hold that in high regard. And we need to share it in our work. Now, if you want to dig even deeper into this whole concept of respecting ourselves as writers and our writerly lives, then subscribe to this podcast because we will continue to talk about this for many episodes to come. If you want to examine this for yourself, you can do that via the blog post for this week, which you can find at nancyrue.com/blog. And in fact, all things Scribbly are discussed there on nancyrue.com. So please feel free to visit. And until then, Scribblies, until next time, scribble on.